Jimin is enraged after discovering that Jungkook is being threatened over his tattoos. What happens next will send shockwaves through HYBE and test the boundaries of loyalty and defiance. Can friendship survive the pressure of corporate control? The cold, sterile air of the HYBE office felt like a vice around Jungkook's chest. His eyes were glued to the phone screen, watching the ominous text flash across the screen. You will be removed from upcoming promotions if you don't remove those tattoos. This is your last warning. The threat was clear, the power behind it undeniable. Jungkook's hands trembled as he set the phone down on the table. He hadn't expected this. Sure, he knew the company had certain standards, but this was different. This was personal. He could almost feel the weight of his tattoos, the ink etched into his skin, each one a part of him, a piece of his soul. They were an extension of who he was, his identity, his expression. And now they were a threat to everything he had worked for. His breath hitched when the door to his office slammed open. Jimin stood there, his face a mask of fury. His usually calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by an intensity that made the room feel smaller. What the hell is this? Jimin's voice was low, dangerous, as he strode forward and grabbed the phone from the table, his eyes scanning the threatening message with disbelief. I don't know, Jungkook whispered, trying to calm the storm inside him. It's nothing. I'll figure it out. Nothing? Jimin's voice cracked like thunder. You think I'm going to let them treat you like this? They can't just control you like this, Jungkook. He slammed his fist against the table, causing Jungkook to flinch. They want to erase a part of you? A part of who you are. Jungkook looked up at him, guilt flooding his chest. I don't want to cause trouble. Trouble? Jimin interrupted, his eyes wild with anger. The trouble is them trying to turn you into someone you're not. What kind of world are we living in if we have to hide who we are to fit their image of us? HYBE doesn't get to decide who we are, Jungkook. You don't have to hide yourself for them. Jimin's hands were shaking now, but his eyes were burning with a fire that Jungkook hadn't seen in him before. It's not about hiding, Jungkook murmured, looking down. It's about keeping everything intact. My career, the fans. I don't want to jeopardize it. Jimin took a deep breath, stepping back to collect himself, his voice calmer but still edged with pain. What about your peace, your happiness? You don't owe them your soul. Do you understand me? Jungkook met his gaze, guilt and frustration wrestling inside him. I just don't want to disappoint anyone, he admitted, voice strained. Disappoint? Jimin scoffed. What about disappointing yourself, huh? What about disappointing me, your friends? We're supposed to have your back, but you're letting them take away pieces of you. What happens when they ask for more? When they start telling you what you can and can't wear, what you can and can't do? When does it end? Jimin's words hit harder than any threat HYBE could throw at him. Jungkook felt like he was suffocating. The room felt too small, too stifling. He opened his mouth to say something but stopped himself. What could he say? Jimin was right. He had been trying to please everyone. His company, his fans, his own doubts. And in doing so, he had been losing himself. Suddenly, Jimin's hand slammed against the wall beside him, the sound echoing through the room. His breath was ragged as he stood in front of Jungkook, his face now close, their eyes locked. Let me make something clear, Jimin growled, voice sharp and cutting. I don't care who the hell tells you to change. I'm not standing by while they try to break you. We don't bow to them. Not anymore. You're not alone in this. Jungkook blinked, his mind reeling. What are you going to do? Jimin's smile was fierce, a rare but deadly expression. I'm going to make sure HYBE knows exactly who they're messing with. They'll regret trying to control you. Before Jungkook could respond, Jimin was already on his way out of the office, his strides filled with purpose. Jungkook felt his heart race as he stood there, the weight of Jimin's words sinking in. He had never seen Jimin like this. Not this angry, not this determined. But it wasn't just anger he saw in Jimin's eyes. It was something deeper. It was loyalty. And that loyalty scared him more than anything else. He had known Jimin for years. They had been through so much together. Good times, bad times, the kind of bond that didn't break easily. But this was something new. Jimin wasn't just fighting for Jungkook's tattoos. He was fighting for his freedom. Fighting for his identity. Jungkook stood in the silence of the office, feeling something stir deep within him. A feeling he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. Hope. But it wasn't over. He knew that. The storm was just beginning. As Jimin stormed down the hallway, he could hear the murmurs of HYBE staff. Whispers that would soon turn into outright panic. Jimin wasn't going to back down. And neither would Jungkook. In the dimly lit hallway, Jimin stopped for a moment, clenching his fists by his sides. This wasn't just about a tattoo. This was about standing up to a system that had for too long tried to control everything they did. This time it was different. This time Jimin wasn't going to let them dictate who they were. The air was thick with tension as Jimin stormed through the corridors of HYBE's headquarters, the sound of his footsteps echoing like the pounding of a war drum. His mind raced, each thought sharper and more calculated than the last. He had always been the calm one, the mediator, the one who kept things together when they were on the edge of falling apart. But now, his mind was clouded with fury, and every step he took was charged with purpose. He had one goal, to make HYBE understand just how far they had crossed the line. They didn't own him, they didn't own Jungkook, and they certainly didn't own their identities. He wasn't going to let anyone, no one, take that from them. Not again. As Jimin approached the executive offices, the air seemed to grow even colder. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a static hum, creating an almost eerie atmosphere. He didn't even knock. The door to Bang Si-hyuk's office opened with a force that made the entire room tremble. Bang Si-hyuk looked up from his desk, his face unreadable, his expression professional, as always. But Jimin could see the tension behind his eyes. He had heard the rumors, and now the storm had arrived at his doorstep. The normally composed CEO of HYBE was no longer the pillar of control he once was. Jimin? Bang Si-hyuk said calmly, as if his entire demeanor could keep the chaos at bay. What's this about you causing a scene downstairs? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked into the room, his eyes hard, locking onto the older man with an intensity that made even Bang Si-hyuk shift in his seat. Jimin's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, his rage barely contained. Don't play dumb with me, Jimin spat. You're threatening Jungkook over his tattoos? You're trying to erase a part of him, a part of who he is. How dare you? How dare you try to control him like that? The silence that followed was deafening. Bang Si-hyuk's fingers drummed lightly on his desk, his eyes never leaving Jimin's. But Jimin saw the faint twitch in his jaw, the subtle way his hand clenched. He wasn't as calm as he appeared. Jimin? Bang Si-hyuk said slowly, his voice smooth but carrying an underlying weight. You don't understand. This is bigger than personal preferences. This is about maintaining the image of the group, about keeping everything intact. Jungkook's tattoos are a liability. They're problematic for our brand. Problematic. Jimin's voice rose, the edge of his words like a blade. You're talking about him like he's just some tool, some product to be molded. He's a human being. Bang Si-hyuk. He's not just a puppet for you to control. Bang Si-hyuk's eyes narrowed. I'm not controlling anyone. I'm making decisions for the good of the group. It's my responsibility to ensure that BTS stays at the top. The brand comes first. Brand, Jimin repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. What about who we are, huh? What about the people we've become over these years? BTS is not just some brand. We're real people with real emotions, real identities. And you want to strip that away because of a damn tattoo? Jimin took a step closer, his eyes seething with intensity. I'm done playing by your rules, and I'm not letting you destroy Jungkook's life because of some superficial image. He's not a puppet. And neither am I. The air between them crackled with the weight of unspoken words. Jimin stood there, unmoving, daring Bang Si-hyuk to challenge him. But the older man didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply stared at Jimin, his expression calculating. You're being reckless? Bang Si-hyuk said quietly, his voice carrying a threat that sent a chill down Jimin's spine. Do you have any idea what you're risking here? The company, the fans, everything. It's all at stake. And what about us? Jimin's voice cracked with emotion. What about the bond we've built, the sacrifices we've made? Do they mean nothing to you? Do you really think you can just dictate who we are? The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Bang Si-hyuk leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressing together as he thought. Then, without warning, he stood up. The power in his movement was unmistakable, and Jimin couldn't help but feel a shiver of unease run down his spine. You think you can just challenge me and walk away without consequences? Bang Si-hyuk's voice was low, but the venom in it was palpable. You're forgetting who holds the power here. You think I haven't built this company from the ground up, that I haven't sacrificed everything for its success? You think I'm going to let a couple of tattoos ruin everything I've worked for? Jimin's fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't back down. You're wrong. It's not just about the tattoos. It's about you trying to break us down. It's about control. And it's about time someone stood up to you. For a moment, there was no sound but the quiet hum of the lights. Then, suddenly, the door opened again, and Jungkook stepped into the room. His face was pale, his eyes red as if he had been crying, or at least holding back tears. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he just stood there, the weight of his presence heavy in the room. I'm not leaving, Jungkook's voice cracked, his words fragile but defiant. Not like this. Not when they're trying to take away who I am. Bang Si-hyuk's gaze shifted to Jungkook, his face unreadable. You're making a mistake, Jungkook. I don't care, Jungkook replied, his voice stronger now. I've made my decision. Jimin looked at his friend, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and fear. Jungkook was standing tall, finally fighting back, and Jimin wasn't going to let him face this alone. As they stood there, the tension thickening like a storm cloud, the door slammed open again. The last person Jimin expected to see entered, Taehyung. His usual carefree demeanor was gone, replaced with a seriousness that matched the gravity of the moment. We're all in this together, Taehyung said, his voice steady, unwavering. We won't let them tear us apart. Not now, not ever. Jimin's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The moment they had all been waiting for, the breaking point. The moment when everything they had worked for, everything they had built, was about to shatter or evolve into something new. The war between the loyalty to their company and their loyalty to themselves was about to begin. And there would be no going back. The tension in the room was suffocating. The sharp, almost tangible silence hung like a heavy curtain, drawing every breath into a slow, aching inhale. Jimin stood beside Jungkook, their resolve palpable. Taehyung, too, lingered in the doorway, his usual smile gone, replaced by the seriousness that weighed heavier than any joke he could have made. Bang Si-hyuk stared at them with a look that could freeze even the most seasoned veteran. His sharp eyes glinted with a mixture of disbelief and resentment, as if the very presence of Jimin, Jungkook, and Taehyung in his office was an affront to the carefully constructed world he had built over the years. I warned you. Bang Si-hyuk's voice was calm but brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering. Do you really think you can challenge me and not face the consequences? Jimin stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Bang Si-hyuk. Consequences? What, like being threatened for trying to express ourselves? You want to control us like puppets? You think this is still your company to run however you want? His voice rose, fierce and unwavering. Taehyung moved into the room, his voice cutting through the mounting tension. No one's a puppet here, and you're sure as hell not pulling the strings on us anymore. Bang Si-hyuk didn't flinch. He leaned back against his desk, the weight of his presence undeniable. You all forget something crucial. I built this company. I made you. I gave you everything you have. And now you come in here and question my authority. Jimin's laugh was bitter, almost a mockery of the words coming from Bang Si-hyuk's mouth. Built it? You think you built us? You didn't build us, Si-hyuk. You exploited us. You manipulated us into thinking you were the only one who could give us a chance. But we're done with that. We're done with you. There was a flicker of something dark, something deeper. In Bang Si-hyuk's eyes, his fists clenched, but his voice remained controlled, despite the storm that was clearly brewing inside him. I didn't come this far to let a bunch of kids destroy everything I've worked for. You think you can just tear apart the legacy I've created? You want to walk away from all of this? Fine. But it will cost you. The words hung in the air like a dagger, sharp and ready to pierce any sense of hope they had left. Jimin could feel the pulse of his heart quicken. What's it going to cost? Our souls. His eyes flashed with fire. I'm done living for your vision, for your idea of who we should be. It's time we start living for ourselves. The atmosphere was electric now, the anger in the room a combustible force, ready to ignite at the smallest spark. Jungkook, standing silently beside Jimin, finally broke his silence. I'm not going to be the person you want me to be anymore. I don't care about the promotions, I don't care about the brand. I'm done. A gasp echoed through the room, but no one dared speak. Jungkook's words landed like a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of everything they had worked for. The look in his eyes was one of finality, a decision made. He wasn't backing down. Jungkook. Bang Si-hyuk's voice was quieter now, but no less menacing. You think you can just walk away from this? From everything you've worked for? You'll ruin everything, including your future. Do you really want that? Jungkook's expression hardened, his voice steady but filled with the weight of all the years he had spent in silence. Maybe I don't want this future. Maybe I don't want a future that forces me to hide who I am. Maybe I'm tired of being the perfect idol in your eyes. Maybe I want to be me. Bang Si-hyuk's lips twisted into a semblance of a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. You think you're the first one to fight for freedom here? You think you're the first one to have dreams outside of this? You're naive, Jungkook. The real world doesn't work the way you think it does. HYBE is your only chance at survival. Jimin's patience was wearing thin, his emotions finally breaking free. We don't need your brand to survive, he spat. What we need is respect for who we are. What we need is freedom, not your damn restrictions. Jungkook turned toward Jimin, his eyes filled with a quiet gratitude, but also a deep sadness. The path they were on was unclear, but Jimin's words, his unwavering support, were all that kept him grounded. They were no longer just idols. They were individuals, standing together in defiance of the forces that had tried to mold them into something they were not. As the air thickened with the raw intensity of the confrontation, Taehyung spoke up, his voice low and resolute. You've made a lot of threats, Si-hyuk, but the truth is you're outnumbered. This isn't just about Jungkook anymore. This is about all of us. And we won't let you tear us down for the sake of your precious image. Bang Si-hyuk's gaze swept over them, his eyes narrowing in quiet fury. For a moment he said nothing, just watched them with a cold calculation. Then, finally he spoke, his voice low, filled with venom. You'll regret this. You think you can just walk away and not pay the price? You have no idea what you're dealing with. A tense silence stretched between them all. It was a moment of reckoning, no longer about tattoos, no longer about a company. It was about control, about power, about standing up for something greater than themselves. But then, as quickly as it had started, the confrontation shifted. The door to the office opened with a creak, and a figure stepped inside, someone unexpected. It was Bang Si-hyuk's assistant, carrying a small stack of papers. Her presence in the doorway was a stark contrast to the intense emotions roiling inside the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said softly, her voice timid, but you might want to see this. She held out the papers, her eyes flicking nervously between the men. Jimin glanced at her, then at Bang Si-hyuk, whose expression shifted momentarily. A flicker of concern passed through his face before it was quickly masked. Jimin stepped forward, grabbing the papers. His eyes scanned them and then he froze. They've already started to spread rumors, he muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. The papers were filled with reports, leaks, accusations, and threats about the group. The headlines screamed about the potential downfall of BTS, questioning their loyalty, their image, their ability to stay on top. It was clear now. HYBE wasn't just trying to control them. They were trying to destroy their credibility. Jimin clenched his fists, his anger bubbling to the surface again. This is their game now. If they can't control us, they'll tear us apart in the eyes of the world. Jungkook's jaw tightened, and Taehyung's eyes flashed with a storm of emotion. The stakes had just been raised. The fight wasn't just about their future, it was about their very survival. The moment of truth was fast approaching. The battle lines were drawn. The question remained, would they crumble under the weight of HYBE's power? Or would they rise up and forge a new path? One where they would finally be free. And in that silence, as the weight of the world pressed down on them, one thing became clear. They would never be the same again. The war had only just begun. The news spread like wildfire, faster than any of them could have anticipated. The rumors, the leaks, the whispers. They tore through the internet, infecting every corner of social media. Fans, once loyal and unwavering, began to divide. Some rallied behind Jungkook, posting their support, shouting about his right to express himself. Others, the louder voices, condemned him, calling him a disgrace, questioning his commitment to the group. Jimin sat on the edge of his bed, his phone in hand, staring at the comments pouring in. He read each one with a heavy heart, feeling the sting of betrayal from people he thought would always stand by them. They were no longer just fighting against HYBE, they were fighting against the world. Their loyalty to each other, to their fans, to their identities, was being tested in ways they hadn't imagined. The weight of it all seemed unbearable. The battle was no longer just theirs, it was everyone's. Their identities, their art, their careers, everything was on the line. But as Jimin stared at his phone, his mind drifted back to the confrontation in the office with Bang Si-hyuk. He could still hear the chilling words echoing in his mind. You'll regret this. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, the fury simmering just below the surface. He wasn't gonna back down, not now, not ever. Jungkook's voice broke through the silence. Jimin, what are we going to do? Jimin turned to face him, the seriousness in Jungkook's eyes reflecting the weight they both carried. Jungkook was pacing back and forth, his hands running through his hair as if trying to figure out the impossible. He was torn. He was still uncertain, still caught between the fear of what he might lose and the desire for something more. But Jimin could see it now. Jungkook was ready. He was ready to fight for himself, for them, for their future. Jimin stood, walking towards him slowly, his face set in a grim expression. We're going to do what we should have done from the start. We're going to fight back. Jungkook stopped, meeting his gaze. But what if we lose everything? What if we really can't go on without them? Without HYBE? Jimin's voice softened, a quiet understanding in his tone. Jungkook, I know you're scared. I am too. But what we're fighting for isn't just us. It's for everyone who's ever felt like they had to hide who they were. For every fan who's ever felt like they were part of our family. For ourselves. For the people we've become. If we lose, at least we'll lose fighting. But if we don't fight, we'll lose ourselves. Jungkook stood still for a moment, processing Jimin's words. The weight of his decision settled deep in his chest. He had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict, but he could feel it now, the call to stand up for what was right, even if it meant losing everything. Okay, he whispered, more to himself than to Jimin. Okay, we fight. Just then, the door to their room opened abruptly, and Taehyung stepped inside, his face a mixture of determination and anxiety. Jimin, Jungkook, this is getting worse. You need to see this. We do what we've always done, Taehyung said, his voice calm but with a fire that was impossible to ignore. We speak from the heart. We go live. We tell the world who we are, what we stand for. If they want to destroy us, let them. But not without hearing our truth first. There was a heavy silence in the room as the weight of their plan sank in. They weren't just going to sit back and let the world decide their fate. They were going to take control. They were going to show the world that they weren't afraid. And just as Jimin opened his mouth to speak again, the door crashed open, and an unexpected figure entered. It was the last person any of them had expected to see. Bang Si-hyuk. The room fell silent as the CEO of HYBE stood in the doorway, his expression cold, his eyes hard. He didn't even look at the members as he walked toward the center of the room, his every step echoing with authority. You think this is just going to go away? Bang Si-hyuk's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. You think you can fight me and walk away unscathed? Jimin stood up immediately, his fists clenched. What do you want from us, Si-hyuk? His voice was strained, the anger finally boiling over. We've done everything you've asked, but now you're trying to control us, dictate who we are, what we stand for. It's not about the tattoos anymore. It's about freedom. And we're not going to let you take that from us. Bang Si-hyuk's lips curled into a thin smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Jimin. This isn't just about your little rebellion. You think the fans will support you? You think they'll care about your so-called truth? I'll make sure your careers are over. I'll make sure you don't get to control your narrative. This is the price of defying me. Jimin's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back down. You can try to destroy us, but we'll never stop fighting. We're not scared of you anymore. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the promise of a battle that would tear apart everything they had built. The war had officially begun, and there was no telling where it would end. Bang Si-hyuk turned slowly and left the room without another word, the door slamming shut behind him with a resounding thud. Jimin stood there, his chest rising and falling with the weight of the moment. He could feel the storm coming, and he knew that whatever happened next, it was going to change everything. We do this together, Jimin said quietly, his voice fierce and full of conviction. We fight. We fight for us. For the truth. For everything we've worked for. No one can take that from us. The others nodded, each of them feeling the intensity of the decision. There was no going back now. The world was watching, and the real battle was just beginning. The air in the studio was heavy, the fluorescent lights above flickering intermittently, casting long, stark shadows across the room. The tension between the members was palpable, an unspoken understanding between them as they sat in silence. The world outside had turned against them. The internet was ablaze with rumors, fabricated stories, and manipulations. But in this room, the raw truth remained. Jimin was standing by the window, his back turned to the others, staring out into the dimming city. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one darker than the last. He could feel it, the eyes of the world watching them, waiting for them to slip up, to show weakness. But there was no weakness left in them. Not anymore. Jimin, we need to act now. RM's voice cut through the stillness, his tone urgent but measured. We can't wait for the world to dictate our future. We need to take the narrative back. Jimin didn't respond at first. His fingers tightened around the glass of water in his hand. They had all been here before, pushed to the edge, forced into impossible decisions. But this time it felt different. They were no longer fighting for fame or success. They were fighting for their souls. Jimin, RM's voice was softer now, but there was a trace of worry behind it. We're with you. We can't keep running from this. We need to tell the world the truth, our truth. Jimin slowly turned, meeting RM's gaze. His face was hard, a mask of determination. But behind the steel was something else, fear. Fear of what they might lose, fear of what they might become if they allowed HYBE to control them any longer. I know, Jimin muttered, his voice quiet but sharp, but it's not just about us anymore. This goes beyond us. It's about everything we've fought for, everything we've built with the fans. I won't let them tear us apart like this. I won't let them tear me apart. The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their shared history, their bond. The room was silent, each member lost in their own thoughts, the heaviness of the situation settling over them like a storm cloud. Jungkook was the next to speak. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. I'm scared, Jimin. He looked up at his friend, his face vulnerable. What if we lose everything? What if we can't go back from this? Jimin's heart ached as he saw the fear in Jungkook's eyes. The younger man had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict, who did his best to keep the peace. But now, the weight of their decisions was starting to crack the facade he had built. Jimin stepped toward him, his hand gently resting on Jungkook's shoulder. Jungkook, we're not going to lose. We've already lost everything that matters if we let HYBE control us. This is the only way we can get back what's ours. Jungkook looked down, his eyes glistening with the beginnings of tears. He wiped them away quickly, but the vulnerability was still there. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose us. You won't, Jimin said firmly, his voice low but filled with the kind of certainty that only came with the realization that there was no other choice. This is for us. For all of us. Just then, the door swung open, and Taehyung walked in, his face tight with frustration. His usual carefree attitude was gone, replaced with the unmistakable expression of someone who was about to face a battle they didn't know they could win. They're already spinning the story, Taehyung said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. The media is out of control. They've already twisted everything we've said, making us look like the bad guys. Jimin's stomach churned at the thought. The press had always been their double-edged sword, glorifying them one moment, tearing them down the next. But now, with HYBE pulling the strings, it was worse than ever. They want to destroy us, Jimin muttered. They want to turn the world against us, and we're just supposed to sit back and take it? Jungkook's fists clenched again, his emotions boiling over. Why? Why is it always us? Why is it always our choices that get questioned? Because we're powerful, Taehyung replied, his voice cold. Because they know that if we break, so do they. We're not just a group anymore. We're a movement, and they can't control that. They can't control us. Jimin looked at each of his members, his heart swelling with pride. This was what he had always known. This was the family they had built, the bond that had held them together through everything. They weren't just idols. They were more than that. This is it, Jimin said, his voice steady. We have to go live. We have to show the world who we really are. We can't let HYBE dictate our narrative any longer. We need to take back the power. Do you think it'll work? Jungkook asked, his voice filled with doubt but also a flicker of hope. I don't know, Jimin admitted, but it's the only choice we have. As the conversation continued, a plan began to form. They would go live, and they would speak from the heart. They would not hide behind carefully crafted statements or PR. They would show the world the truth, raw and unfiltered. The decision had been made. There would be no turning back. The time had come. The camera was set up, the lights were dimmed, and the room was silent. Each member stood in front of the camera, their faces solemn but resolute. Jimin's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at his friends, his brothers. This was their moment. The world was watching. This was the most vulnerable they had ever been, but it was also their greatest strength. Let's do this, Jimin said softly, taking his place in front of the camera. The live stream began. Jimin's voice broke the silence first. We've always said that we are who we are because of the fans. We've always been real with you. But lately, there's been a lot of lies about us, about who we are. And we can't stay silent anymore. Jungkook stepped forward next, his voice trembling but strong. We've been told to hide who we are. We've been told that our art, our expression, our tattoos, that they're wrong. But that's not true. This is us. And we won't apologize for that. The room fell into a heavy silence as each member shared their thoughts, their truths. They spoke about the struggles they had faced, the battles they had fought in silence, and the fight they were now waging in front of the world. We're not perfect, RM said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But we're not the villains in this story. We're just trying to be who we are. And if that's something you can't accept, then maybe we're not the group you thought we were. Tears filled Jimin's eyes as he spoke last. We won't back down. Not now, not ever. This is who we are. And we will fight for it. The live stream ended, and the room was silent again. But this time it was different. They had done it. They had spoken their truth to the world, and there was no going back. As the minutes passed, the comments began to flood in. Fans from all over the world flooded their stream, their support unwavering. Some, of course, still didn't understand, but the majority stood behind them, sending messages of love, encouragement, and solidarity. For the first time in days, Jimin allowed himself to breathe. The fight had only just begun, but this was the first victory. The silence after their live stream lingered like a dense fog, heavy and suffocating. They had expected some backlash, but the magnitude of it was staggering. Social media was on fire, not just with reactions from their fans, but from the entire world. Headlines, videos, comment sections, and private messages all swarmed their notifications. The world was in chaos, and somewhere deep within them, they all knew this was just the beginning. Jimin sat on the couch in their shared space, his fingers numb from scrolling through endless feeds of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. The faces of their fans who once adored them were now divided. Some were still unwavering in their support, while others had already begun to doubt them. Doubt was the most dangerous enemy they could face. Could tear apart their very foundation, and in some ways it already had. Jungkook was pacing back and forth in the corner of the room, his face drawn tight with frustration. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a raw anxiety that no one had seen before. The live stream had felt like a moment of triumph, but now, it seemed like everything had spiraled out of control. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jungkook's voice trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a sense of lost control. "We've broken everything. The fans, they're turning on us. Our careers are hanging by a thread." Jimin's chest tightened as he heard the worry in Jungkook's voice. He hadn't heard Jungkook speak like this in years, not since their early days of training, when the fear of failure seemed to swallow him whole. This wasn't just about tattoos anymore. This was about everything they had worked for, everything they had built together. "I don't know if there was a right thing to do anymore," Jimin finally said, his voice strained. "But what I do know is we can't keep living in fear of what might happen. We can't let them control us, HYBE, the media, the fans. If we fall standing up for what's real. And that's something we can't apologize for." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy and unresolved. Jimin wasn't sure if he was reassuring Jungkook or himself, but he knew he couldn't back down. They had already crossed the point of no return. They had spoken their truth, but now, the fallout was far worse than they could have imagined. A knock at the door pulled them from their spiraling thoughts. Jimin didn't have to guess who it was. Without waiting for an invitation, Taehyung pushed the door open and walked into the room, his expression as grim as ever. There was no joy in his face, no smile that had once been a constant fixture. Taehyung was fighting his own war, just like the rest of them. "We need to talk," Taehyung said simply, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Jimin. He could see it, the emotional exhaustion that was starting to take over the group. He could feel it in his own bones, too. "We've been trying to hold everything together," Jimin said, his voice more fragile than he cared to admit. "But it feels like we're breaking apart. The fans are angry, and we've lost control of the narrative. I don't know what to do anymore." Taehyung stepped forward, his tone firm yet gentle. "We have to keep moving forward. We're not gonna fix this overnight. The media will twist our words, fans will turn against us, but the truth is still the truth. We don't stop now." "But how?" Jungkook's voice cracked as he turned toward Taehyung, his face worn and vulnerable. "How do we fix this when it feels like everything is falling apart?" Taehyung's gaze softened for a moment, his eyes meeting Jungkook's. "We can't fix everything, Jungkook, but we can make sure we never stop fighting for what's right. We have to show them who we really are, not just in words, but through our actions. If we keep pushing forward, they won't have a choice but to see us for who we truly are." Jimin swallowed hard, the lump in his throat growing with each passing second. The weight of Taehyung's words hit him harder than he expected. Fighting back didn't guarantee victory, but standing down would guarantee defeat. They had no other option but to rise from the ashes of their own destruction and rebuild everything that had been torn apart. But the question remained, would they be able to? Could they really hold on to who they were in the face of so much hate and doubt? The sound of a notification broke the silence, and Jungkook's eyes snapped to his phone, the screen lighting up with an incoming call. Without saying a word, he accepted it, bringing the phone to his ear. His face tightened immediately as he heard the voice on the other end. "I don't care what you think. You have to understand what's at stake here." Jungkook's voice dropped, his tone tense. "This isn't just about tattoos. It's about everything we stand for. We won't be silenced." Jimin and Taehyung exchanged glances, both of them sensing the sharpness of the conversation on the other end of the line. Jungkook's expression had darkened, and the hand holding the phone had become white-knuckled. "Then what do you want us to do?" Jungkook snapped into the phone. "We can't just back down. Not after everything we've already lost." A long silence followed, and then Jungkook's shoulders slumped slightly as he ended the call with a sharp exhale. He lowered the phone and looked up at Jimin and Taehyung, his expression tired, but resolute. "It was HYBE. They want us to come to a meeting. They're trying to negotiate. They're offering a way out if we backtrack. But it's not just about the tattoos anymore. They want to control everything we say and do. And if we agree to meet them, we might lose everything we stand for." Jimin's heart clenched at the implications of the conversation. HYBE wanted them to bend, to submit to their terms in exchange for whatever remnants of control they could salvage. But that wasn't the life they had fought for. That wasn't the life they had dreamed of. Jimin stood up, his body trembling with the weight of it all. "This is it, then. This is the crossroads. We either go back to the way things were, or we stand our ground and risk it all." "We don't have a choice," Taehyung said quietly, his gaze steady. "We made our decision when we went live. We made it when we spoke the truth. Now we finish it. We finish it together." Jimin's chest tightened with the burden of their choices, but he couldn't back down. He wouldn't. "Then we go to the meeting. We face them. But we face them on our terms, not theirs." The tension in the room hung heavy, a silent agreement passing between them all. This wasn't just about fighting for their careers anymore. It was about fighting for their identities. It was about fighting for each other. As they prepared to face HYBE once more, Jimin's thoughts spiraled. The truth was that the future was uncertain, the outcome unpredictable. But one thing was clear: no matter what happened next, they would never be the same. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The morning of the meeting arrived faster than Jimin expected. The night had felt endless, each passing minute stretching into hours, filled with restless thoughts and a growing sense of unease. They were about to face the forces that had shaped their lives, their careers, and in a way, their identities. HYBE's offer loomed like a dark cloud, promising safety in exchange for their silence and submission. But Jimin wasn't sure if he could ever go back to the way things were. Not after everything that had happened. He stood by the window, looking out at the skyline of Seoul, the bustling city below oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. His reflection in the glass was almost ghostly, his features hard and unreadable. The weight of the decision, the gravity of what they were about to do, pressed down on him, but he couldn't afford to hesitate now. There was no turning back. The door to the room opened, and Jungkook stepped in, his expression unreadable. He wasn't the same as the night before. The quiet uncertainty had been replaced with something else. A quiet, steely resolve. His eyes were tired, but they burned with a fire that hadn't been there just days ago. Whatever had been weighing on him had shifted. He had made his decision just like Jimin had. "Are you ready?" Jimin asked softly, his voice carrying the weight of the question. Jungkook gave a small nod, his jaw set in determination. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this, but we don't have a choice. We've come this far. I won't turn back now." Jimin didn't answer, his gaze drifting back to the view. For a moment, everything felt surreal. The world outside was the same. The city hadn't changed, but everything for them had. The others gathered around them. Taehyung, RM, Jeon, J-Hope, and Suga. Each of them looked different, their faces tight with a mixture of nerves and defiance. They were all standing at the edge of a cliff, with only the uncertain future ahead of them. Do you think they'll really listen? RM's voice was steady, but the underlying tension was undeniable. Do you think they'll accept us for who we are after everything that's happened? Jimin took a deep breath, finally turning to face his friends. They will listen. Whether or not they accept us is a different story. But we have to make them listen. We can't back down now. If we don't take control of this, we'll lose everything. And not just the group. We'll lose ourselves. Taehyung, ever the optimist despite the storm raging inside him, offered a quiet smile. Whatever happens, we do this together. We fight for each other. That's all that matters. The room was silent as the reality of their situation settled over them. They were standing on the precipice of their careers, their identities, and their futures. It was impossible to predict what would happen next, but Jimin knew one thing for certain. They couldn't let fear dictate their decisions anymore. Jimin walked toward the door, his hand brushing the handle. Let's go. The car ride to the HYBE headquarters felt like a lifetime. The tension in the air was suffocating, thick with the weight of what they were about to face. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, their hearts pounding in anticipation of what would come next. The weight of the decision they had made hung heavily between them, but it was also strangely freeing. For the first time in a long while, they felt like they were making a choice for themselves, for their truth. The elevator ride up to the top floor was equally silent. The building felt like a maze of glass and steel, cold and impersonal. But as the doors slid open and they walked toward the large conference room, the reality of the situation hit them like a freight train. They were about to face the man who had built this empire, the man who had controlled their lives, their careers. They were about to face HYBE. The conference room was sleek and modern, with a large, glossy table in the center. Bang Si-hyuk sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral, unreadable. He didn't rise when they entered. Instead, he motioned for them to sit. The tension in the room was palpable as the members sat down, facing the man who had been the architect of their success, and now, the architect of their struggle. So, Bang Si-hyuk began, his voice smooth but carrying an underlying coldness. You've decided to come to the table. I assume you're all prepared to discuss your futures with HYBE. Jimin met his gaze without hesitation. We're here because we want to control our own futures. We're done being dictated by you. We won't be controlled anymore. We're fighting for who we are. Bang Si-hyuk's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. You're very idealistic, but the truth is you've built your success on my vision. Without me, without HYBE, you'd be nothing. You think you can stand against us and win. The words cut like a blade, but Jimin didn't flinch. He had heard them all before. He had lived them for years, and now they didn't scare him. We're not afraid anymore, Jimin said, his voice steady. We've been afraid for too long, and look where it's gotten us. We've let you control us, tell us what to do, what to wear, who to be. But we're done. We want our freedom back. We're not your puppets, Si-hyuk. A flicker of something, anger, passed through Bang Si-hyuk's eyes, but he quickly masked it, his expression hardening. You'll regret this. You'll regret turning your backs on me. Turning your backs on the very people who made you what you are. Jimin's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening with each passing second. We don't regret standing up for who we are. We've spent too long hiding behind the masks you put on us. This is our last chance to be real, and we're taking it. For a moment, there was only silence in the room. The weight of their words hung in the air like a storm cloud, thick and electric. Then, Bang Si-hyuk leaned forward, his gaze locking onto each of them in turn. You think this is about tattoos, about your image? He asked, his voice low and threatening. It's not. This is about control. And you've lost it. The room was heavy with the unspoken tension, the battle lines clearly drawn. Jimin's chest tightened as he looked around at his brothers, the men who had been with him every step of the way. They had made their stand, and there was no turning back now. You can try to break us, Jimin said, his voice low but fierce. But we won't bend. Not anymore. Bang Si-hyuk's expression softened, but it wasn't a smile. It was a smirk, a cruel acknowledgement of what he knew was coming. "We'll see how long you last." With that, he stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. As they filed out of the room, the weight of the moment hung heavily on each of them. The world had been set in motion, and there was no way to stop it now. The city outside was quiet, but within the walls of the HYBE headquarters, the storm was far from over. The echoes of the confrontation with Bang Si-hyuk still reverberated in the air. Jimin couldn't shake the lingering feeling of unease that had settled in his chest after their meeting. They had stood up to him, to the very force that had molded them. And yet, Jimin couldn't ignore the nagging thought that they were only at the beginning of something much darker. The tension inside their shared space was suffocating. The members of BTS, having just returned from the meeting, were all seated in a circle, their faces tight with the weight of their decisions. They had laid everything out on the table, each of them exposed in a way that made Jimin feel more vulnerable than he ever had. But there was no turning back now. Jimin's fingers gripped the armrest of his chair as he gazed at the other members. Jungkook sat across from him, his expression unreadable, but the air around him felt like it was crackling with unspoken words. The fear, the uncertainty, it was all still there. It wasn't gone. But there was something else now. Resolve. Determination. "We can't let this be the end of us." Jimin finally broke the silence, his voice low but full of conviction. "We've given up so much for this company, for HYBE, but no more. We've lost our identities trying to live up to their standards. It's time we take them back." Jungkook's eyes met Jimin's, his face a mixture of frustration and fear. "Jimin, you're right. I know you're right. But what if we fail? What if we lose everything? The fans, they're torn. Some are with us, but others, they're furious. They think we're betraying them." Jimin let out a frustrated breath, running his hand through his hair. "This isn't about the fans. It's about us. About being real with them. Do you think we can keep up this facade forever? Do you think we can keep pretending that everything's okay, while HYBE controls our every move?" The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of Jimin's words sank in. No one spoke immediately. The fear of failure lingered, hanging like a storm cloud over them all. But there was also the quiet understanding that Jimin was right. They couldn't live this way anymore. They couldn't keep sacrificing their truths for the sake of appearances. "We're running out of time," RM said finally, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "HYBE won't just back down. They'll come at us harder. They'll try to destroy us. They've already started with the rumors and the leaks. What if it's too late? What if they've already won?" Jimin turned to face RM, his gaze firm. "We can't think like that. If we think like that, we've already lost. We fight for our truth. That's the only way we'll win." The other members nodded, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. They were standing at the edge of a precipice, and the only way forward was to take the leap. There was no more safety in silence. They had already made their choice when they decided to speak out. Now it was time to face the consequences. Suddenly, the door to their room opened. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh light outside. Jimin's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the person. It was Bang Si-hyuk's assistant. Her eyes were wide with fear as she stepped inside, quickly closing the door behind her. "You need to hear this," she said, her voice trembling. "They're already putting the pressure on. They're telling you to make a public apology. They want you to deny everything you said. They're threatening to suspend you from promotions if you don't comply. They're making it clear they won't let this slide." Jimin's stomach dropped. The words were a gut punch. He had known HYBE wouldn't just let them walk away from this. But to see it laid out so blatantly in front of them, the weight of it hit him harder than he expected. The ultimatum was clear. Apologize or face the consequences. "No," Jimin said quietly, his voice steady, despite the shock. "We won't apologize. We'll stand by what we said. We've already lost too much of ourselves trying to please them. We won't do it again." Jungkook clenched his fists at his sides, his knuckles white. "They can't do this to us. We've been nothing but loyal to them. We've given everything. But they can't control us anymore. We can't let them do this. Suga, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice low but firm. If they think they can just force us to comply, they're wrong. We won't back down. But we need a plan. We need to be strategic. We don't just fight blindly. We need to show them that we're in control of our own destiny. RM nodded. Suga's right. This isn't just about defiance. It's about taking control of the narrative. If we keep acting on impulse, we'll only make things worse. Jimin stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. We've been careful for too long. We've kept quiet, let them push us around. But no more. We're taking back control, not just of our careers, but of our lives. The assistant stood back, a silent observer as the members of BTS gathered their resolve. The weight of the decision was clear, but so was their unity. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for everything they had built together. The world had been watching, but now they would decide how their story would be told. The phone in Jimin's hand buzzed. His heart skipped a beat as he saw the name on the screen. Bang Si-hyuk. He glanced at the others, who were already looking at him with a mix of anticipation and fear. Answer it, Taehyung urged, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his anxiety. Jimin took a deep breath and answered the call, his heart racing. Jimin. Bang Si-hyuk's voice came through the phone, cold and calculating. I'm sure you've heard the news. I've spoken to the higher-ups. They're not happy with your recent actions. You have two choices, apologize, and we can move forward, or refuse and face the consequences. Jimin could feel the weight of the ultimatum pressing on him, the pressure building. He knew what he had to say. He had made his decision the moment he stepped into this fight. We won't apologize, Jimin said, his voice unwavering. We've spoken our truth and we stand by it. If you want to tear us down, then do it. But we won't bend. We're not afraid of you anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, Jimin wondered if Bang Si-hyuk had hung up. But then, the cold, steely voice returned. Very well. You've made your choice. Don't say I didn't warn you. The call ended abruptly, and Jimin felt a strange sense of relief flood through him. They had made their stand, and now there was no turning back. The battle had been fought. The lines had been drawn. Now it was a matter of survival.